Toby had always been enthralled by the glamour of magic. As a child, he would stay up past his bedtime, flashlight clutched beneath the covers, reading about Houdini or marveling at the illusions of great stage wizards on rented DVDs. What always seemed the most enchanting to him was the ultimate magic cliché, pulling a rabbit from a hat. Even as an adult, Toby would daydream about orchestrating that perfect reveal. He pictured the crisp black top hat perched on the table, a flourish of his hand, and out popped the adorable fluffy creature guaranteed to wow the crowd. Now that Toby was finally pursuing his passion, however, reality was proving to be a lot less glamorous. He'd managed to get his hands on two rabbits, which he lovingly named Marshmallow and Mustard. According to the man at the pet shop, they were well-behaved, docile, and perfectly suited to Toby's illusion. Toby believed him. But nobody had warned him that rabbits have minds of their own, especially when you need them most to cooperate. Toby's first official performance was at a children's birthday party in the local community center. He was so excited he could hardly sleep the night before. He rehearsed in his tiny living room until 2 in the morning, practicing his card forces, fancy flourishes, and his big finale, the rabbit from hat routine. He'd slip Marshmallow into the hidden compartment right before the reveal, and with a dazzling wave of his wand, he would produce her from the hat. Applause, delight, perhaps even tears of wonder in the eyes of the parents. But that morning, everything started going wrong, one problem after another. Toby arrived at the community center to discover that he'd left Mustard, the second rabbit, at home in the cage without latching it properly. That might not have been an issue if Mustard had no sense of adventure, but Toby knew from experience that Mustard loved a good roam around. Panicked, Toby decided there was no time to return and fix it. He hoped for the best, believing Mustard would likely remain in the cage given enough hay and water. He tried not to dwell on a mental image of Mustard hopping freely around his living room, chewing on furniture legs. It turned out that his panic about Mustard was only the first of many concerns that day. His card routine resulted in half the deck landing in the punch bowl, he forgot half the lines to his jokes, and the children, ruthlessly honest, kept telling him they could see his coin palmed in his hand. When the moment came for his big closer, Toby forced a smile and produced the black top hat. He leaned in with a dramatic flourish, whispered words of enchantment, drummed on the brim, and then smoothly reached inside. Marshmallow was supposed to be right there. Instead, he felt nothing. The space was empty. Toby's heart stopped. He palmed around the hidden compartment, praying Marshmallow was just tucked away in a corner, but no, she was gone. Over the giggles of the children, Toby began to sweat. He was so flustered that he hastily pulled the hat away from the spectators, gave it a frantic shake, and then popped it back down on the table. As if on cue, though certainly not the cue Toby had intended, Marshmallow suddenly leapt out while his back was turned, landing directly in the birthday cake with a soft splat. Gasps filled the room. The children squealed with delight, the parents not so much. Marshmallow just sat there, covered in pink frosting, blinking innocently. Toby could only muster a stiff, apologetic smile as the birthday girl burst into loud, uncontrollable laughter. To call that show a disaster would be understating it. Toby ended up speeding home with Marshmallow shedding pink frosting in the passenger seat. There, he was greeted by Mustard hopping free in the hallway. Bits of Toby's mail were shredded in a corner, and the unfortunate remnants of an old newspaper were scattered everywhere, as if Mustard had thrown the wildest rabbit party in Toby's absence. Even so, Toby was determined not to be discouraged. Everyone stumbles starting out, he told himself. Besides, Marshmallow and Mustard deserved a second chance. They were good rabbits at heart, and Toby was an optimist. A few days later, Toby secured another gig, a short cameo performance at a local street fair. Between the jugglers, unicyclists, and the face-painting booth, Toby's magic act was to provide some extra entertainment on the open-air stage. This time, Toby tried to be more prepared. He arrived early, practiced several times with the rabbits to ensure they'd remain hidden until the proper moment, and stuck Marshmallow in the hat compartment only minutes before showtime. Mustard would remain safely at home, locked up properly. Toby's first few tricks went smoothly, drawing in a small, curious crowd. His comedic patter made them chuckle, and a few kids even shouted, "Wow!" or "How'd he do that?" when he performed card changes. The final trick approached, and Toby stirred up suspense. He mentioned a very special magical friend who might appear if the audience clapped loud enough, and clapped they did. Kids jumped and shrieked, urging the invisible bunny to come forth. Toby felt that surge of adrenaline. This is the moment, he told himself. This was the redemption. But the moment he reached into the hat, instead of grabbing a fuzzy, docile bunny, Toby's hand came out empty. No marshmallow. Panic clutched at him. The audience shifted in confusion. Toby took a breath and launched into some short comedic patter to buy himself a few seconds. He peered inside, rummaged with his hand again, and nothing. Then, a flutter of movement made Toby's heart skip. Marshmallow had not only escaped but had somehow slipped out the back of the table. People in the front row began to point as Marshmallow hopped across the stage. Toby ran after the bunny, only to have Marshmallow slip under the unicyclist ramp. He tried to remain calm. Pretend it's all part of the act. So Toby waved his wand theatrically, describing how this cunning rabbit might appear anywhere. He bent to look under the ramp, only to have Marshmallow dart out the other side. The crowd was now thoroughly amused by Toby's comedic chase. As Toby lunged and the rabbit darted, passers-by started filming with their phones. Right as Toby nearly grabbed Marshmallow, she hopped off the stage entirely and headed for the face painting booth. A child with a bright tiger face spotted the bunny and squealed in delight. In the scramble, Toby knocked a tray of paint to the ground, causing multicolored splashes across the grass. At last, Toby managed to gently corner Marshmallow underneath a folding chair. When he lifted the chair, the rabbit bounded right past him, beneath an older gentleman's feet, and darted back onto the stage. By this point, Toby had lost any pretense of composure. Applause and laughter jumbled together around him, both enthralled and entertained by the sheer chaos. Everyone was clearly having a riot, everyone except Toby, who was red-faced and panting. Finally, with a desperate dive, Toby encircled Marshmallow in his arms. The crowd went wild with cheers. Assuming it was all a planned comedic bit, they roared with approval, tossing coins into Toby's tip bucket. Toby forced a grin and took an over-the-top bow. The fiasco left him exhausted, but the silver lining was that the street fair crowd seemed to adore the spectacle. After the show, a local events coordinator approached Toby, praising the improv comedic value of his act. Toby tried to keep a bright side in mind. Maybe some of these gigs would lead to bigger and better opportunities. However, he recognized that he had to refine his rabbit routine, because so far, his illusions involving Marshmallow and Mustard were working out more like acts of sabotage. Determined to prove himself, Toby enlisted the help of his friend Sandra, a part-time dog trainer who offered moral support and a few suggestions on how to keep small animals calmer. Sandra advised Toby to spend time familiarizing the rabbits with the magic props. She also recommended feeding them treats once they stayed in place. Over the next several nights, Toby dedicated hours to these exercises in his living room. He set his collapsible table in the corner, nestled a few leafy greens in the hat compartment, and tried to train Marshmallow to remain inside until her big moment. Meanwhile, Mustard hopped around, awaiting his turn to be part of the illusions. Slowly but surely, Toby thought they were making progress. One morning, Toby got a call from a family friend who was hosting a small wedding reception. They were hoping for some lighthearted entertainment after the ceremony. "We want something fun and different," the friend explained. "Now, we're not looking for a fancy mentalist or anything, just some quick illusions for the kids and maybe a few table tricks." Toby's heart soared. This felt like a step up from birthday parties. He gladly agreed and began to plan an extra special performance, complete with both Marshmallow and Mustard, if possible. On the big day, Toby arrived at the country inn where the reception was being held. The inn's garden was decked out in white tablecloths, pink ribbons, and rows of pastel flowers. Toby placed his props in a charming gazebo beside the rose bushes. He double-checked the rabbit's compartments, the secret pockets of his coat, and every gimmick that might produce hidden confetti or illusions. He reminded himself not to panic. After all, everything was going to be perfect if he just stuck to his plan. Marshmallow and Mustard were locked safely in their compartments. Toby had made sure of that. When showtime arrived, Toby's opening routine unfolded with surprising success. He made handkerchiefs change color, turned a plastic rose into a real one, and even performed a short series of close-up illusions at each table. The guests loved it. Cheers and applause echoed around the garden. Toby's confidence soared. Just a few more illusions, and then the big rabbit finale, and he'd seal his reputation as a budding magician with unstoppable charm. Little did he know that an unexpected spanner was about to be tossed into the works. The bride's nephews had shown up late, each armed with a giant bottle of bubble solution and wands that produced an absurd amount of bubbles. Suddenly, half the garden was afloat in shimmering orbs. Toby tried to keep his composure, but he quickly realized that Mustard was especially entranced by floating bubbles. Without warning, Mustard sprang out from his hidden compartment and bounced straight onto Toby's table. Toby froze, momentarily uncertain how Mustard had escaped. The rabbit scrambled around, trying to catch the dancing bubbles, then leapt gracefully to the ground. Panicked, Toby gasped, "Oh dear, ladies and gentlemen, it seems my magical colleague has decided to join us a bit early." He forced a jovial laugh, hoping to pass it off as a comedic flourish. Meanwhile, guests tittered at the sight of a small rabbit hopping around in pursuit of bubbles. Toby placed a hand on the second hidden compartment, praying Marshmallow was still tucked inside. It appeared Marshmallow was where she was supposed to be, so Toby's immediate task was to grab Mustard. The bride, who was thankfully good-humored, found the scenario quite amusing and encouraged Toby to carry on, but Mustard was lost in a dreamland of floating spheres, chasing them across the garden. Toby followed, wand clutched in hand, frantically apologizing to the grinning guests as he weaved between tables. Every time Toby reached out, Mustard darted just beyond his grasp. He politely dodged a few dinner plates, nearly toppled a wine glass, and apologized to the band, who were mid-tune but also having a hard time not laughing. Eventually, Toby snagged Mustard mid-hop, but the sudden movement caused Toby's hat to topple off his head, and out popped Marshmallow, this time apparently having gotten fed up with staying cooped up inside. Marshmallow landed gracefully on a white linen tablecloth, startling the guests seated there. Unfortunately, in her startled dash, she toppled a small vase of flowers and darted straight towards the cake table. By now, Toby's face was bright red. The comedic spectacle was reaching epic proportions. Guests were pointing, laughing, and half rising from their seats to watch the unfolding drama. Rushing after Marshmallow, Toby realized too late that he was still holding Mustard in one arm. Mustard squirmed at being restrained, so Toby tried to cradle him carefully while also scooting around tables to try and catch Marshmallow. The bride's nephews found this hysterical and started trailing after Toby, blowing more bubbles around him. Marshmallow hopped onto the table where the towering wedding cake, a multi-tiered marvel of white buttercream and sugar flowers, stood. Toby's heart nearly stopped. One miscalculation and that cake could tumble. "No, no, no, no!" Toby gasped, juggling Mustard as he glided around chairs. Luckily, Marshmallow skirted away from the cake's edges back onto the grass. Determined to avoid a fiasco that would overshadow the entire wedding, Toby lunged forward. He managed to scoop Marshmallow up just before she darted beneath the table. A wave of relief washed over him. Struggling to keep both rabbits secure in his arms, Toby turned to the audience of wedding guests, smiling shakily. "A round of applause for my delightful assistants, would you?" The crowd clapped enthusiastically, hooting and whistling. Though Toby himself was mortified, it seemed the guests were enjoying the spontaneous comedy. Toby exhaled and carefully returned the rabbits to their compartments, this time making sure to latch them before performing a hasty bow. "That concludes my performance," he announced, relieved to safely end before any more catastrophes could occur. Fortunately, the newlyweds were all smiles, praising Toby for a unique and memorable IFX perception act. Following that performance, Toby seriously considered developing a new signature trick, anything that didn't involve live animals. It was hard to ignore that the unscripted mischief of Marshmallow and Mustard was, ironically, getting him more attention than he might otherwise have gotten. He received a handful of calls from folks who'd heard about the comedic magician with the unpredictable rabbits. The entire town seemed to anticipate that Toby's illusions would devolve into a show-stopping chase sequence. Part of Toby was proud to be in high demand, but he wanted to prove he was more than a hapless rabbit wrangler. Determined to change his luck, Toby signed up for an amateur talent show, hoping to impress the judges with a flawlessly executed rabbit routine. This time, he poured extra care into every step. He invested in sturdier compartments, developed shorter illusions so the rabbits wouldn't have to wait too long, and tried to keep them comfortable with fresh greens. On the evening of the talent show at the local auditorium, Toby peeked through the curtains, scanning the crowd. Friends, family, and curious townspeople filled the seats, whispering in anticipation. He spotted Sandra in the front row, giving him a supportive thumbs up. As Toby's name was announced, he walked onto the stage with as much confidence as he could muster. His opening illusions were a triumph, perfectly timed with no sign of rabbit sabotage. The crowd was attentive, enthralled. Toby couldn't stop a small grin from crossing his face at how smoothly everything was going. Then came the final act. Marshmallow was poised to appear in Toby's arms after a classic "hat is empty." No, wait, it's not routine. Toby produced the hat, turned it upside down, and showed it to the audience. It was empty. He placed it on the table, performed a short flourish, tapped the brim, and reached inside. At first, Toby felt nothing. He was sure his heart skipped a beat, but then, soft fur brushed against his fingertips. Marshmallow was exactly where she was supposed to be. Toby pulled her out, holding her gently for all to see. Applause erupted. A wave of relief, almost dizzying, washed over him. In that moment of triumph, however, Toby forgot about Mustard, who was supposed to remain out of sight in a second hidden location, not to be revealed until the end of the show. With the crowd's attention fixated on Marshmallow, Toby neglected to secure the latch for Mustard's compartment. Seemingly offended at being left out, Mustard chose that precise moment to burst forth, bounding across the stage in one energetic leap. The audience roared anew, delighted at the second rabbit. Toby's hold on Marshmallow slackened, and she capitalized on the opportunity by squirming free. Now both rabbits were loose, scurrying toward the footlights. The audience gave an excited gasp. Toby tried to remain calm, but shaky laughter escaped his lips. He dashed forward, juggling his wand, the hat, and the comedic dignity of the act. Mustard hopped straight to the edge of the stage, momentarily glaring out at the crowd with wide eyes, and then pivoted to scurry behind the heavy black curtains. Marshmallow, in the meantime, had discovered a small gap in the stage set, leading to the backstage area. Sandra craned her neck in the front row, trying to see what chaos was unfolding. Toby, powerless in the glare of the spotlight, dashed to the curtains. What followed was a comedic meltdown. Toby ran behind the curtains and discovered Mustard sniffing about near the stage electrical cords. Marshmallow, for her part, had wandered toward the stage manager's control panel, flicking her ears in curiosity. When Toby tried to grab one rabbit, the other darted away, leading Toby in circles. He accidentally bumped into the stage manager, who brandished a clipboard in confusion. Meanwhile, the audience could only see Toby chasing invisible shapes behind the curtain, gleaning the meltdown from Toby's frantic shadow silhouettes and the occasional glimpse of fluffy ears. The entire auditorium was in stitches. Finally, Toby managed to corner Mustard under a table loaded with lighting equipment. He scooped up the rebellious rabbit, but as he did, Marshmallow made a beeline for the entrance back onto the stage. Toby, with one rabbit tucked under his left arm, sprinted after the other. As soon as Toby emerged onto the stage again, the crowd cheered even louder. Marshmallow sat there, near Toby's feet, blinking innocently at the bright lights. Toby gingerly picked her up, adjusting his hold on Mustard. The applause continued thunderously. Toby, still breathless, gave an unsteady bow with a grin. He had no illusions about being a polished, slick magician anymore. He was the comedic chaos act, but the crowd loved it. After the show wrapped, Toby expected the worst from the judges. He assumed they would see his performance as a disorganized fiasco. Instead, he was greeted with laughter and compliments on his comedic timing. One judge said, "I've seen plenty of illusions, but I've never seen a performer handle a live animal chase with such charm." Another judge remarked, "You have a distinct style. Keep that authenticity. It'll take you places." Toby's cheeks burned, partly from embarrassment, partly from surprise that people were responding so positively. Despite his disapproval of his own chaotic performance, Toby left with a small trophy for Best Comedy Act. Walking home after the show, Toby carried Marshmallow and Mustard in their travel crate. He felt a swirl of relief, pride, and confusion all at once. He had discovered success, but not in the form he'd initially planned. In his imagination, he had always envisioned a crisp, elegant reveal of a single rabbit from a top hat, performed with the practiced grace of a professional illusionist. Instead, his real performances had turned into comedic romps, complete with precarious wedding cakes and unstoppable bubble chases. Sandra, who had watched the entire spectacle, joined Toby as he left the theater. "You know," she mused, "you've stumbled onto something pretty unique. People love these rabbits and the unpredictable hijinks. Maybe you could incorporate that into your act more intentionally." Toby grimaced slightly. "I guess I could, but is it really magic if all I'm doing is chasing them all over the stage?" She patted his shoulder. "You perform illusions, you try to create a wow factor, and yes, sometimes your rabbits steal the show. But clearly the audience can't get enough. The illusions are part of it, but your comedic flair, unintentional or not, sets you apart. You're the magician whose tricks never go as planned, and yet it's unforgettable." Quietly, Toby looked down at the rabbits. Marshmallow was thumping her feet, still riled up from the chase. Mustard was dozing now, seemingly unbothered by all the fuss. Toby exhaled, letting the tension float off. Maybe Sandra was right. Perhaps this was the direction his magic career was destined to take. He'd dreamed of pulling rabbits out of a hat with perfect grace, but maybe the genuine entertainment value came from the madness that ensued when the rabbits pulled themselves out. With that thought, Toby realized that he could embrace the chaos. He could tweak his scripts to play up the unpredictability, adding comedic lines to transform every potential mishap into part of the show. He could invest in safer, more enclosed backdrops so the rabbits wouldn't cause too much damage, but maybe allow enough freedom for a comedic scramble. The more he thought about it, the more Toby laughed at his own attempts to be the flawless magician he'd always revered. In truth, a bit of laughter and heartfelt groans of sympathy weren't such a bad way to entertain people. And so, Toby the Magnificent gained a delightful new identity as Toby the Harebrained Illusionist, a performer who specialized in illusions that nearly always went off the rails thanks to his two mischievous sidekicks. Birthday parties booked him for the comedic spectacle, wedding receptions requested cameo appearances to amuse their guests, and local fairs brought him back year after year. Over time, Toby got better at managing Marshmallow and Mustard, but he never quite lost that streak of unpredictability, nor did he want to. Like it or not, part of the wonder of live performance was that anything could happen, especially with rabbits involved. Years later, Toby would look back and recall the day Marshmallow hopped into a birthday cake, or how Mustard nearly toppled the wedding dessert table, or the epic chase behind the curtains at the talent show. He'd remember the red flush on his cheeks, the pounding of his heart, and that mortifying feeling of everything going wrong. Yet he'd also recall how the audience roared with delight, how they cheered and liked him for who he was. They never wanted the same old polished illusions they could see on TV. They wanted real, unfiltered entertainment, and Toby and all his comedic misfortune gave them exactly that. As for Marshmallow and Mustard, they continued to be Toby's faithful accomplices. Sure, they still took detours and made escapes at the most inopportune moments, but Toby took it all in stride, playing it up for laughs, knowing that even if the trick didn't go as planned, it would still be a memorable moment. Casting illusions that ended in comedic chaos became Toby's signature. Indeed, there was always a certain magic in seeing the audience laugh so hard they were blinking back tears. Sometimes the best timing is the worst timing, and Toby, Marshmallow, and Mustard proved it show after show, one ill-timed rabbit reveal at a time. And in the end, Toby wouldn't have had it any other way.